we're talking about virtual simulations and whether they can be effective learning tools or knowledge building tools. Today we're with Nanette and Brandon and myself, Shane. So let me just start it off by saying that we're here to discuss Jonassen's learning with computers and its connection to learning by doing stuff through simulations. Are simulations effective in learning in meaningful real-world problems? We should definitely start by looking at what a simulation is.
Well, to me, Shane, simulations allow users to work in a controlled environment, and they provide users with the opportunity to measure quality, really, and observe their work and habits.
Thanks, Nanette. That's a good overview of it, and I think simulations basically are constantly used in many different fields to gain experience for employment also. So, for example, it is used in the medical field to teach surgeries before the operating room's present or to deliver a child. It also allows students to be able to apply theories that they have learned in a practical setting.
We see it used to prepare soldiers for combat training. We see it in simulation of flight. So.
Those are actually excellent examples. And there was a lot of research done regarding simulations and a lot of assumptions as to the effectiveness of it. So Najou and De Jong, 1993, actually believed that it allowed students to put it to the test, the what-if situations, allowing for intuitive knowledge to be used rather than factual knowledge.
Yeah, but there are different ways in which we're learning through simulations. So the first being in that we learn a procedure through a simulation, and the second being that to understand a model through a simulation. Both will allow students to develop greater understanding through the feedback that they receive while interacting with that simulation.
And yeah, well, while reviewing this topic, we did come across several articles. One article in particular, How People Learn with Computer Simulations. This was by Douglas Holton from the Utah State University. And he came up with 4 lenses for pedagogical purposes, which we think are important inside of simulations. So looking at knowledge-centered, assessment-centered, learner-centered, and community-centered. These are 4 very interesting and very relevant purposes for simulations.
They definitely are, Brendan. And with knowledge-centered, it really is dependent on the learner's prior knowledge of the topic and the concepts which they are expected to be learned from using the simulation.
Yeah. So higher learners' familiarity with the system will allow for a better learning and better comprehension of those ideas while using that simulation.
Yeah, and as well as that, Shane, learners' knowledge can influence how effective a simulation really is. The need for various supports through the simulation are still required for students to conquer obstacles when learning and understanding what's been presented.
That's right, Brendan. You know, and when you look at assessment-centered, it really is the assessment of actions within simulations that allow for immediate and authentic feedback. Because of that, it allows students, it gives them really an opportunity to refine and reassess their approach to concepts and learning theories while doing the simulation.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So students who are able to keep track of their performance through that simulation. Now, with respect to the refinement of skills and providing student understanding, performance-based assessments have been successful in compared when compared to memorizing facts and figures and procedures. So, but some still believe that asking students to discuss the rationale while still working on an issue may interfere with their learning of that information.
Yeah, and looking at community-centered, simulations have no social component. So they are effective for generating shared experiences or a focal point for group discussions, but they don't really allow for the group interaction. So if groups are forced to observe someone else manipulating a simulation, they often become distracted or less engaged in what's in front of them. So.
Yeah, of course, and in the same sort of tone there, Brendan, you'll get more assertive personalities. So if you're trying to manipulate a simulation as a group, there will be one assertive personality that will take over that sort of situation, and less assertive personalities are going to sort of step back and they become more of just sort of following directions, and so their learning is not the same.
That's right. And, you know, partners with differing hypotheses were expected to come to a better understanding. But a lot of times it's not the case. Shared experience does not create shared or common understandings of the same situation.
Yeah, so from a learner's standpoint in that, simulation has been proven to be successful as it's progressing, has gotten more enjoyable, engaging for students. Simulations are definitely on the rise, though. So when we look at the experiences and see how they relate to positive outcomes or how they enhance knowledge.
So basically, students realize the potential of a simulation as a source of constructive feedback that enables them to take more responsibility for their learning. And if you look at the positive results of workplace-related simulations, the biggest thing developers and the institutions when using simulation training need to be aware of is how to assess students who misunderstand or don't understand at all.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of the process, Nanette. And basically, the simulation process is learning through exploration, like we've been talking about, and being able to relate that real-world knowledge into the virtual reality and vice versa. So when you have virtual control, you can relate better to problem-solving skills because of the constant personal management you have over the simulation. When inside a simulation, though, you are in control of the time and any adherent constraints that were presented to you, as well as following forms of communication or coordination if, in fact, you're working with others. And Shane, did you have an example of something on campus there?
Yeah, so there is a simulation being used right now at even the Whitby campus at Durham College. There's a crane instructor's course, and so a crane operator's course, I should say, and they have a crane simulator. You can look down at the images down below. There's a gentleman using one of them. And in talking to the instructor for the course, Kevin Keys, and he said that there's no chance that a student even gets near a real crane because of the dangers and that are inherently involved until they've mastered the simulation. And from an operator's perspective, it is no different other than how you can perceive the world. You can't look left and right is basically all it is. But when you're operating a lot of these machines, you're not usually looking from left to right. You're simply viewing what it is that you're manipulating. And it's exactly developing those skills that they need before they can transfer them to the real thing. And by that time, the transference is very narrow.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big problem is just the obstacles overcoming virtual reality and simulation inside of a teaching atmosphere or in a training atmosphere is basically looking at the transference. And I'd say an argument could have been posed maybe 5 to 10 years ago with respect to simulation and providing meaningful knowledge outside of that simulation. But in today's age, the technology's there. It's extremely advanced, and when looking at other forms of simulation and how basically there's a happy marriage happening between them, there's technology evolving now that is working and is effective, but they're realizing that incorporating another piece of a simulation or an existing piece of technology makes the perfect immersion, or basically it's able to captivate that learner in a way that is real world, or as real world as it's going to get. And Nanette, did you have some questions you wanted to leave us off with today?
Yes, definitely. The first being, do you think that due to predetermined outcomes, simulations aren't very effective? And how do we know we are building meaningful knowledge out of the simulation? And lastly, what might one provide to help students develop a more casual understanding? So thanks for listening, and we look forward to having a discussion with you.